slow start, tech issues, but our presentation is about subglacial lakes in Antarctica. We're going to focus a lot on Lake Vostok because it's pretty well researched. We're going to be looking at origins, evolution, and ecology of those lakes. And with that, Ryan's going to take it away.
Oh, you may want to give a reason why Jamie may not be speaking much right now.
Oh, yes. So yeah, Jamie has a really sore throat right now, and just had to give a school tour to a bunch of kids at Minnetrista. So yeah, her voice is kind of shot. So we're going to kind of be playing this by ear in terms of doing her parts for her. This was prepped with everyone doing their own parts, but we might have to, play it by ear a little bit. Just as a heads up for that.
So the overall of how we're going to proceed with this presentation will involve us first defining what a subglacial lake is, its origins, the ecosystems and ecology of subglacial lakes, research done on said ecology, and reach our conclusions. By the time after the conclusion, we will then proceed with a group discussion and activity that should be able to help reinforce what we have taught you today.
So pay attention because there will be food.
Now, first off, what exactly is a subglacial lake? A subglacial lake is the retention of the meltwater from the glacier as a result of heat sources causing the fresh water to melt. And these are usually calculated in order to find the geothermal energy and are spatially varied. So first, we will discuss the origins of these lakes. Now, as presented by this diagram I have created, there are a number of different sources and contributors to this meltwater. You can have light that comes down from the atmosphere.
I'm sorry, where's Lake on that diagram?
These blue bulbs right here represent the retentions of water. This one right here being the subglacial lake.
Thank you, because I can't really see it.
It'll be easier when you actually see them. We're going to provide the PowerPoint for everybody at the end, so it'll be a little bit easier to see on there.
Thank you.
Now, so the heat sources that can contribute to this meltwater can come either from the atmosphere through UV light. It can come up from the ground through geothermal heat and energy. It can come from the friction created by the glacier moving across the surface, as well as the pressure created from the glacier's weight itself. Now, the movement of this meltwater can either flow upon the surface in surface flow over the glacier, can be retained on the top of the glacier, can move through the glacier and the accretion of the ice, as well as along the base of the glacier itself, which is also what allows the glacier to move. Now the retention of this water at the bottom of the glacier can either come from the meltwater collecting in an open space or area created by the glacier's movement, usually through the retained meltwater caused by the pressure, or they could even be, or in the case of Lake Vostok and some of the lakes of Antarctica, they could originally have been lakes present on its ground surface, but had been covered by the Antarctic glaciers as it moved over them, thanks to them being lowland lakes, often surrounded by ridges. Now, the lakes would then be expanded by the contribution of the meltwater from the glacier, and these waters would often then mix together, which for some of them which had been found to have been possibly connected into a marine strait or even a bay, this would have salt water mixing with the fresh water. This is just a quick diagram to show an idea of how the retention of the subglacial lakes would occur from the drainage in the lake, and even how the movement of the glacier itself can cause fossil lakes. That's just a minor point. Right? Now, to look at the lakes of Antarctica, we have to go back a while. a very long while, to the time of the Eocene. Now during this time of the Eocene, which was prior to 34 million years ago, Antarctica had mostly been ice-free. It had been ice-free, and there was a time when the global sea levels were also higher. This had found a complex ecosystem on the continent, and many of the low areas, as mentioned before, may have been straits or bays. Now, as time went on though, and it reached between 25 to 34 million years ago, Antarctica started experiencing a period of cooling, and the surface ice started to form over the said lakes. This ice had started to isolate the lakes as the sea levels started to drop, thereby cutting off some biota from its surrounding and parental areas. Then at about 15 to 25 million years ago, during the Miocene, the cooling period starts to see a time of more intermittent ice surfaces. Basically, these icing overs become more current, become more frequent. Basically due to the sea levels dropping, the sea levels which dropped because of the cooling and the formation of the glaciers that would become the mainstay feature of Antarctica. This is just an example of a picture of a subglacial lake when it had been drained of its water. That one there. Now, then about 15 million years ago, the ice coverage was seen to become more continuous, thereby allowing the lakes to be permanently buried in the ice. With this comes the decrease in light intensity and oxygen concentration, as well as an increase in pressure. Now, of course, without these factors, it was expected that extinctions would occur. Many fauna that had been used to seawater and other conditions within the lake had started to die off. However, some of the fauna and microbes had actually started to survive as they were able to adapt to these situations, as well as start to feed off of the nutrients that come from the fresh water of the lake, as well as geothermal energy that had been found to be active within the area. These contributing factors are what allowed many speciation events in order to occur, which were a result of increased ion gradients, stratified layer mixing, and definitely higher mineral inclusions. For millions of years after this, the microorganisms and biota had to evolve and adapt in these systems, many of which coming from within the megafauna, others that have been present at the time, eventually adapted and evolved, allowing themselves to survive in these conditions that many presume to be uninhabitable. Now, to further discuss these special little critters, we will continue on to the next part of our presentation: the ecosystems and the ecology of subglacial lakes.
Oh, may I suggest one thing? Is when it is JV section, please indicate it so we know when you're playing things by ear.
Which is right now.
Okay.
Okay, you want to take the clicker?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a mic for her to use.
If I had one, I would bring one.
And anytime you want, just let me know and I can take over too.
Yeah. Can you guys all hear me? You guys can. Okay. Awesome.
The people over there, though,
Do you,
may not be able to hear you.
here's an idea, could you, like, how close do you need to be to the presentation? Could you get closer to the class? Would that be okay, Dr. Dowling? Could she, like,
As long as the recording can hear her, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
like, yeah, could you stand, like, I don't mean to, like, isolate you or anything, but.
Being isolated. Okay. I'm just gonna stand over by it. Hopefully it can hear me right here.
All right.
Okay. So I had the ecosystems and ecology of subglacial lakes. If I can push the button.
Here, now.
There we go. Okay, so I looked at the ecosystems of glaciers. So based on the articles that I read, I found that there were two key glacial ecosystems that have been identified. One is the supraglacial ecosystem, which is above the glaciers. So, like Reinhardt mentioned, how the meltwater was retained on top of the glacier, that was that ecosystem. So that includes, the snowpack, the streams, and also pools. And the subglacial ecosystem, which is the basal ice and till mixtures, and also the subglacial lakes. And I kind of wanted to show how, like, the different critters that were in these ecosystems. So I focused mainly on the microorganisms since that is what we are focused on. So the supraglacial ecosystem, here we go, has a diverse, like, community of microbes. So they have bacteria, they have algae, they have viruses, they also have tardigrades, diatoms, fungi, rotifers, and yes, phytophagists, and then
It's hard to say with a sore throat. It's
yes,
hard to say with a not sore throat.
it is. And then subglacial ecosystems, they have, which we were focused on, they have an aerobic bacteria, fungi, and then archaea. Archaea, yes. There we go. And yeah, if you want to play the video.
So we've got a little video to show you. I think, I can click on it now. Before we couldn't click on it. And we'll let this ad play.
Oh, is it behind the ad?
Yeah. But I need it to not be maximized so I can unmute it.
What number?
Here we go.
Antarctica. Small, secluded communities of human scientists live and work on the vast frozen desert.
So this is showing how we can access the lakes, and now it's buffering, of course.
And down, below the cold cap of rock-hard ice, a completely isolated community of microorganisms has now been discovered, living in the body of water known as Subglacial Lake Whillans. As described in the journal Nature, a team led by researcher Brent Kirshner of Louisiana State University has identified nearly 4,000 different species, or groups of species, alive deep in the sequestered lagoon. The work, using biochemical analysis and RNA sequencing techniques, has implications for understanding just how Earth prosecutes its global carbon balance. Though it's been known for a few years that Antarctic glaciers and the tops of ice sheets can harbor simple organisms, life has never been observed in this type of habitat before, so deep and so secluded. It was a surprising discovery.
It's about what?
To find it, researchers had to bore through the ice with sterile drilling and sampling technology, while making certain not to contaminate the water beneath, either on the way down or the way back up.
It's extraordinarily cold to do it that way.
Or was this stuff that got stirred up?
The Whillans Ice Stream Subglacial Access Research Drilling Project was funded by grants from the National Science Foundation and the Montana Space Grant Consortium. On the West Antarctic ice sheet, the temperature is so cold, it's hard to make the case for surface water or any other material penetrating its way down through almost a mile of solid ice. The organisms living down in the subglacial lake are likely the descendants of those left behind in ancient warmer times, before the thick fabric of ice began to clothe the Antarctic continent. Similar life forms, living in the very deep seas outside Antarctica, depend upon a constant snow of dead and decaying life from above. But these newly found microcreatures under the ice must make their living directly from minerals pulverized by the shifting ice, especially those bearing sulfides and iron, and from carbon and nitrogen bubbling up from sediments on the lake bottom. These organisms apparently feed off their own dead in a tiny ecosystem separated from the vast biosphere of Earth. This could be an analog for subsurface environments on other worlds. Mars, like Antarctica, was once
The rest of it isn't really relevant for our conversation. It talks
He
about
kind of,
Oh, but they have good skill in that.
yeah, so he kind of goes on a rant about space, and it's like, no.
I'm going to cover a little bit more about extraterrestrial stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
As in not Earth. Not Earth. We're not storming Area 51 here.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Not that kind of
happened.
extraterrestrial.
Those
Yeah,
were-
that already happened.
Yeah, that was, I don't even know what that was.
That
But,
was the 20th.
how do we get our slides to be full screen again? I'm just going to hit present again. Okay.
Okay. If the bone. Awesome. Okay, so the video pretty much covered, you know, that it is, sorry, the subglacial lakes are, you know, they have extreme environments. You know, there is pressure from the overriding glacier. There's also limited nutrients and also complete darkness. So they can't photosynthesize, so that's obviously not something they can do to complete their life cycle. There's also, you know, extreme cold, and there also is probably hydrothermal activity, which is something that I read from one of the papers. So, you know, there's heat in there too, even though there is extreme cold. And there's also dissolved oxygen, which is delivered by melting, if I can say that word.
Meteor.
Yes, that word, ice.
Sorry. I've had laryngitis before and I've had to give talks and yes, I totally am very sympathetic and empathetic because I know exactly how hard it is.
It's just like words.
And there's certain words that are hard and difficult and hurt to say, yes.
Yes. So you know, the video also covered like how these guys would survive. You know, they do rely on a lot of minerals, and they also, you know, convert their carbon dioxide, which is something that I read in one of the articles that I had, to organic compounds. And basically, they just have developed this really complex and interconnected community, including, you know, the living microbes. They feed on the deceased ones. Oh, and this is still me.
I
So,
can take this if you want. Would you like?
I can do it,
Okay.
I think, it's all good.
You still need to be able to talk too, so, for later on in the future.
I do have a kid, so at some point, yeah, but it'll be fine. Okay, so I just kinda wanted to show, you know, some of these articles that I read, the abstracts, since.
Leave it up for a little bit. We're not going to read it.
Yeah, there's no way I'm gonna read it. Just to kind of show that, the different studies that they've done on these lakes.
For example, in this study, they'd used ice cores. They had drilled over the Lake Vostok area with permission from the Russian observation team over that area to be able to collect ice core samples that had these traces of these microorganisms, run them through RNA data analysis and processes in order to verify the speciation as well as the analysis of the overall accretion of the ice from the glacier.
We have a little bit of a summary of what this article, the ecology of subglacial Lake Vostok, which we had a lot of articles we went through. In fact, Dr. Dowling knows that I originally sent her 11 articles to post on the canvas.
Yeah,
I didn't know we were supposed to only have 3, so.
Yeah, they had to go and,
So we had to pare down our research a lot. I honestly can't remember if this was one of the ones, because I'm so familiar with all of these. So this was one of the ones that you saw, right? Okay, great.
yes.
So, as you know, this study was done in
Yes.
2013. Analysis of the ice indicated the presence of thousands of different species of organisms. Of those, 94% of those were bacteria species. 6% were eukaryotic, and 2 are archaea.
Archaea.
Okay. See, I don't have the excuse that I don't have a stomach throat, I don't have that excuse. Here's a little quote from the article. Based on the sequence data, the lake appears to contain a mixture of autotrophs and heterotrophs capable of performing nitrogen fixation, nitrogen cycling, carbon fixation, and nutrient recycling. Basically just repeating what we've already said in an article form. Here's another one. I do not believe you had this one. This is microbial communities within the water column of freshwater of Lake Braddock, East Antarctica, predominantly 16S rDNA, biotopes, and bacteria cultures.
So something to note.
Do you have this? Do you have something about this?
So this one is not a subglacial lake, it's actually a lake on top of the glacier, but I wanted to include it because it does have some of those
Okay,
micro-
so for the recording, this is not a subglacial lake. This is a lake on top of the glacier, but it has relevant impacts as well. It kind of is almost as a compare and contrast type of a deal, versus what we have in specifically subglacial, like underneath glacial lakes, versus supraglacial lakes. And summary of this was done in 2015. The deepest non-subglacial lake in Antarctica. There were 4 water samples collected, various layers, with the lake stratification. There's different layers of your water that you can get different results from. There were 5 bacterial phyla. I don't know how many different species within those, but there were obviously enough to have to just talk about your phyla, or phylum, and 2 eukaryotic phyla. So there's a lot of stuff out there. Actinobacteria seems to be most abundant with 41% of the sample data, and then 16 phylotypes classified as new unknown species within these samples. So there's, even on stuff that is easy to access, it's in Antarctica still, which is why, and you'll see in a minute, how hard it is to actually access these lakes, these subglacial lakes. Even in the non-subglacial lakes, there's a lot of stuff we don't know about yet. Basically, that's the whole point. The article goes into very, very nitty-gritty details about biology, which is why we didn't subject this one to you guys.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the, yes. This is why I do geochemistry and not biogeochemistry.
Yeah, this is why I'm this is why I'm environmental management and not biology. It's very, very detailed into its biology part, but it is very useful for this presentation, which is why we ended up talking about it. Does that do it justice pretty much? Okay. This one, I also can't remember if you've seen this. You have not seen this one? Okay, microbial community structures, subglacial lake, Willans in West Antarctica.
Is that the same one as this?
Oh, you do have this one.
It looks like the sociology, ecology of microorganisms.
It's different.
Is this a different one? Okay.
So I guess the one's slightly.
different.
This is different. Okay.
Okay.
Wait, no, yeah, no, this is different.
This is different. Okay.
The abstract's different.
There are, yeah, a lot of the article. I mean, when I was doing double checks for our sources at the end of this, I had to double check to make sure we were actually citing the correct ones, because there were some of them we didn't end up using. Amongst those 11, there are some of them we did not end up using, and there were some additional ones which we did use. A lot of them have very similar titles, so I had to double check which ones are which. So this one's also not our. We're going to focus later on about Lake Vostok, which is the largest subglacial lake in Antarctica. This one is just another example of a subglacial lake, not subglacial Lake Vostok. This was 2016 as an assessment of inhabitants of Lake Willans, and this looked at specifically bacteria that include Candidus nitroca. Nitrotoca, I can talk. Do I even want to try to pronounce these? I don't know.
Sideroxidins, Theobacillus, and Ovidiferous.
Nice. Very nice.
I'll let you take care of this. And then there's Archaea candidus nitrosoraceum. Sorarchium, I guess.
Close enough.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Dowling.
Nitrosarchium.
Yeah. Basically, these bacteria live by oxidation of reduced iron, sulfur, and nitrogen compounds, like you saw in the video. This is just another example of, yes, there is life in these lakes that are under potentially miles of ice. And there are living things in these lakes, which is fascinating to me. So, this is my part now, why does any of this matter? I just talked about all this biology stuff, and it's like, why does any of this matter? Great, there are microbes living underneath lakes, underneath miles of ice. It certainly is not affecting your daily life. Well, maybe. Due to the isolation of these lakes, these subglacial lakes, the impact of humans on these subglacial lakes is limited because it's under miles of ice. These lakes are described as some of the last pristine environments on Earth that have been untouched by humans. Because really, almost any other environment, we even found plastic in the deepest parts of the ocean. So there is a human impact there. There's really no substantial human impact on these environments yet, and we're trying to keep it that way. The life in these lakes, since it has been not only isolated from us, but isolated in and of itself, could have some parallels to life on other planets, potentially Mars, but more likely some of the ice moons like Europa, Jupiter. We might find something like this, some of the life on potentially Europa like this, underneath the whole planet is, or the whole moon is just ice. It's an ice ocean, and there is liquid water underneath it. So we might find stuff like this. We don't know. Because of the pristine nature of these environments, any attempt to research or explore these has to take into account any potential for human interaction, contamination, etc. Which takes us to Lake Vostok and the research that's been done on that. 1998, there was a Russian-led team that drilled an ice core of 3,623 meters, which is, help me with my math, with my miles. It's like 2-ish miles-ish, something like that?
I was thinking 3.6 kilometers. I
Let's
had
call
no
it 3.6,
idea.
let's call it 3.6 kilometers. That's a lot of ice that they drilled through in order to get access to Lake Vostok. They stopped about 120 meters short of reaching the surface of the lake due to contamination concerns, rightfully so, because of the drilling fluids that they used contained antifreeze like freon and kerosene.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing that they did not go all the way through. They had and the reason why they stopped so far, it's like 120 meters, it's kind of like a lot. There was about, the weight of the entire column of the ice borehole that they drilled was around like 60 tons of drilling fluid. So yeah, they kind of had to stop that far from the lake surface in order to not breach through with the weight of just the drilling fluid alone. Worse than that was that after the fact found that the drilling fluid might have been contaminated with surface microbes, which would have completely destroyed any sample that destroyed any sample that they would have gotten had they actually penetrated into the lake. After this, stricter guidelines for subglacial lake research were put into place by the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research.
I will say that
Yeah.
the Russians, when they put their base there, had no idea they were on top of a subglacial
Oh, no.
lake at that
They
point
put
in
their,
time.
it was around in the mid-70s, I think,
Yeah,
they
and
put their
the-
lake in, yeah, they put in they put in their station in the mid-70s, I believe. And they had actually started work on this, I think, it was like 20 years prior, I can't remember now, on this borehole.
Oh,
Like 20 years prior, and they had off and on work on this borehole, just due to various concerns, plus like Soviet Union stuff, there's limited funding, blah, blah, blah.
yeah, there was that issue
But
too. Yeah, no, they really had no idea
No,
they were on a
I-
subglacial lake until much later on with it, when they got, the satellite imagery.
Exactly.
And that's when they realized, oh, we might have to worry about this. Otherwise, kerosene and freon, they don't freeze.
Yeah,
That's why they used them.
exactly. And they both happen to make nice cooling fluid, which I'm gonna cover in a little bit as well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. No, I'm gonna cover that. So they actually did go the last 120 meters in a separate borehole. This was finished in 2012. They did it in a kind of a special way. They had to. They were not using kerosene and freon, fortunately. They were using a quote clean lubricant, which was later on found to be contaminated anyway. But they did it in a way so it didn't actually enter the lake. It's kind of hard to describe it. I was looking for a good diagram for this, but I couldn't really find anything. So this is impossible to read. I understand back at the very back of the room, but when we upload the document, it'll be easier. Basically, what this shows is the last little bit of the lake. Here's the lake right here. The last bit that they stopped at was right here. They're estimating that this was 420,000 years old worth of ice right here. And here's the accretion ice, which is what they ended up sampling from in 1998,
Right.
where they stopped basically. And the process of how they took their 2012 sample was they got right to the surface of their borehole, and then of the borehole at the top of the lake, let the water pressure, because these lakes are under pressure, let the pressure of the water kind of push itself up into the borehole, and then they let it freeze. They then took a sample of that refrozen water from the lake, and that's how they took their sample. So it technically didn't contaminate the lake. I say technically, well,
Oh,
there's
that's
the
an interesting idea.
jury's still out on that. Like I'm gonna say, analysis of the core show that there are potentially thousands of species of microorganisms like some of the things that we've already talked about. However, the sample is potentially contaminated with the mixture due used to keep the borehole from freezing, like I've already said. A second parallel borehole was finished in 2015, in January 2015. They used similar drilling fluids, but this is when they were extremely careful not to let that's when they used the second method of their letting the ice or the water enter the borehole and then letting it freeze and then taking the sample from there. But as you can see, there's potential for problems with these drilling methods. You got to deal with your contamination of your drill bit. You got to deal with a freezing of the borehole. You've got to deal with a whole host of problems. Traditional drilling, this is what I was getting at earlier, Dr. Dowling. The drill bit needs to be kept cool in traditional drilling. It needs to be kept cool with a drilling fluid to prevent overheating. Now in the Antarctic, believe it or not, you still have that issue, but you have the additional problem of you have to keep the hole from freezing, which is why we use, I say we collectively. No, I'm not actually going out there to do that. But we use a combination of a cooling to keep the drill bit cool, a fluid to keep the drill bit cool, as well as to keep the borehole from freezing. So we use something like kerosene or freon to keep antifreezes to keep the drill bit from freezing and simultaneously overheating. There's a different method which was used in Lake Willis, is that it?
Yes.
Which used, this was a UK-led team in, I believe, 2011. They did a borehole in Lake Willens using a hot water drill. And this was done with, now the article I read said that they use surface snow as their water source, but I don't think you'd be able to get enough surface snow from that, so I think the article might have been missing something. I could not cross-reference that enough to find another source. Now the video, and other videos that I've seen, I think the video talked about water source for, they showed a little bit of a, I almost want to go back to the video. The nozzle bit where the guy was pulling the sample from, like scraping that, I believe that was a hot water drill. 95% sure.
Yeah, because they're talking about Lake Willens, so yeah.
Okay.
Lake Willens was done completely different compared to any other lake for subglacial.
It's hard. It's
You are
hard.
contagious, subglacial.
I'm sorry, guys.
So, well, the article said that the surface water from surface snow is heated and then filtered, basically pasteurizing the water that's used for drilling purposes. This hot water is used to melt the ice. Excuse me. This diagram, which is also impossible to see from the back, I'm trying to blow it up as much as possible, kind of has a little schematic of how this works. There's a water storage, a tank basically. If the water is heated and then is pressurized, and then is basically blasted through a nozzle into your borehole. That water is recirculated and is collected, recollected back into your storage tank, so you can almost have as much of a closed loop system as possible. And this process basically repeats itself. You have hot water blasted down into your borehole is pumped out, your water recirculated. The process continues until you get really close, because then, really close to your lake, because then the problem is you have the potential to thermally contaminate your lake. You could almost kill any microbes living around your entry point into the lake. So there's really no perfect answer here for ways to access these lakes. This is certainly better than traditional drilling methods because there's a lot less risk of actual contamination, but you have the risk of sterilizing your sample. But this is much safer. The other problem is this is very time consuming. It's slow. Literally just using a heat source to melt through millennia old ice. Eons old. Is it actually, am I safe to say eons in a geology class?
It's fun. And I will tell you, it is extraordinarily slow. When I have had to do 6 meters of ice before, took like 3 days to go and do it.
Wow. And this is thousands of meters.
Yeah, that's
So,
thousands of meters. I'm in
6 days, or 6 meters taking 3 days.
Yes.
This is thousands of meters.
Yes.
This is very slow. This is very energy intensive.
Yes.
So,
It is.
short answer, there really is no good way to access these lakes. You really got to pick the lesser of two evils. Do you want to get there, even with regular boring, it's still not fast because ice it's hard as rock, literally. It is extremely hard. It is very dense.
And actually at that age, it's glacial ice, which is vastly different than the normal ice that we know here.
Yes.
And glacial ice is much, much denser.
Yes. I think I covered everything on that. So, now we have our little activity. To recap, I'm gonna turn it over to you guys. What is a subglacial lake in the most general terms? I'll take answers from the audience. Don't make me start picking on people.
Lake under a glacier.
Hey, there you go.
I don't want
Because
you to
that
cheat
was
us.
so easy. Actually,
Absolutely.
good, because that was so easy. I'm gonna give that one to you.
Okay.
Yeah, retention of meltwater from a glacier above it. Good job.
Try.
and partially because we only have 4 pieces of food and we have 5 questions. So
Try to answer another one.
we planned this out. We planned this out well. What's the difference between superglacial and subglacial ecosystems?
One's above, one's below.
More specific than that. Nice
Oh,
try.
yeah.
Anyone?
Cool. Pressure and temperature? Pressure.
Keep going. How about I combine those 2 answers? I literally just said it out loud.
Temperature and pressure differences due to being above versus below
There you go.
the glacier.
Yeah.
Of course.
Carissa, you can have my Cheetos.
Would you like a Cheeto or Cheeto bag or would you like?
Can you repeat the answer because it's a little.
Yes.
Yeah.
So main difference being between the 2 environments. One is above glacier, one is below the glacier, but there's a difference in temperature and pressure as well. That makes it 2 vastly different environments. Here, I'll go ahead and put the answer up there. You have in your superglacial, you have snowpack, you have streams, you have melt pools, and yes, it is above the ice and glacier surface. Your subglacial is you have dealing with basal ice and your till mixture from your glaciers, and you have subglacial lakes. Yes. All right. Ooh.
Call her. Oh,
That's why I'm not on the baseball team.
What does the subglacial lake ecosystems consist of?
Oh, I know. 94%
Shy?
oxygen.
I think that's the answer we have basically. Yes. Would you like a candy cane? We have a candy cane.
Okay.
You sure?
Yeah, I had a teacher in science that had many
See, if you had done this, you could have had
I know.
delicious meal of Cheetos and candy cane instead.
Darn. That's even healthier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Go ahead. You want Cheetos? Go
I'm
ahead.
good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, Jake can have my Cheetos.
You might be getting your candy cane back.
Alright.
So what makes these environments extreme? What is the factor that makes it extreme environments? Factors, I should say plural.
Extreme temperature.
Yes,
Okay.
and?
There's a little bit of thermal heat.
Uh-huh. So we have hydrothermal activity, high pressure, a little bit of nutrient, complete darkness, because light obviously does not penetrate through 3,600 meters of ice, and low dissolve. Really, these are very extreme environments. You really only have extremophiles living here. Okay, does anybody want the last Cheeto thing? Because you guys don't have to, because I honestly just kind of lifted these from the grad office anyway.
Oh, I was like, all right.
Dr. Dowling, would you like Cheetos?
No, thank you. It was red dye and it doesn't work for me.
Heard that.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just thinking.
I saw you taking notes on it,
Yeah.
okay. So how do these organisms survive in these environments? We just talked about how extreme these environments are.
You have like nitrogen fixers and.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Yeah,
Chemotropes.
chemosynthesis is what I'm looking.
Chemosynthesis.
Yes, but yeah, chemiotropes. Yes.
Oh,
There's,
that's not.
no, it is.
It
It is.
Different words.
It is, it's exactly what you said.
It,
There's
it
phrases
also was
with different-
mentioned within the video how some of these microorganisms also basically feed off of the nutrients and supplies from the microbiota who have died.
Mhm.
So in a way, it is a closed system community of cannibalism, if you want to be blunt about it.
It's the cannibalism part that, I thought that was just really mostly for humans.
It's a microbe eat microbe world out there.
Yeah, could it be scavengers?
That's,
Yeah.
that's probably more appropriate, sorry.
No, it's just, I like
The
how.
trinivores, yeah, there we go. Because, and honestly, microbes in the ocean, in the deep ocean, have this, the video explained that as well. They have similar,
Properties.
yeah, like the term's called, when a whale dies, it's called like a whale fall, I think. When a whale falls down to the bottom of the ocean, there's a whole host of communities that flock to it, and it basically serves as a food source for them. This is a little bit different, obviously. Just your whales are microscopic, and they're about the same size as the things eating them. So, and that's really all we got. Thanks for working with us. We realize it's a little bit different because we had to at a last minute change. Like I was texting Jamie this morning. It's like, are you gonna be okay to talk? Are you gonna be all right? And she's like, yeah, sure, I'll take that aside. So appreciate you working with us for this a little bit. So, are there any questions? Yeah, any questions? Sorry, you're in first. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, okay. Two questions first. What is meteoric ice?
Meteoric ice is the overhead ice that over the lake that then descends. Meteoric meaning something like close to meteorological, so overhead.
Okay, cool. And then, so, besides like human contamination, so that's a direct effect that could cause negative effects to these lakes, but are there any other concerns that humans are indirectly causing? And what are they? So why should we be concerned?
That is a good question.
What's the so what? Why should I care?
Well,
The so what basically being that we have to keep these environments as pristine as possible because they are like I said, they're really the last pristine environment that we have left on Earth, and because they are while they are difficult to access, it can give us a glimpse of what life on other planets could potentially look like.
Isn't
Yeah.
that the opposite of what we're doing then? If we try to keep it pristine?
Well, we have to
I'm sorry,
make compromise.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what, Jenna, you have a very quiet voice and you can't really hear back here.
Sorry.
Yeah, just go ahead and repeat the question.
I asked if there are any, like, why should I care? So the only human perturbation that is occurring with this lake is that we're trying to study it and thus contaminating it. Why, but we want to keep it pristine, like why should I care? Or if there's any other indirect human perturbations affecting the lake. So.
And his answer was because the other, did you answer it? I thought you had.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it was really, because it's kind of answering the question by repeating the question. I realize now. I originally had said because it is the last that I can think of and that many articles agree with is the last pristine, some of the last pristine environments on Earth, and that there are because of how unique they are, it can really give us ideas of what life on other planets could look like. Because they are so isolated from other ecosystems within our planet, they have evolved in such a way, and such as the extreme environment that they exist in. But it really just kind of answers the question by repeating the question, I realize now. So, does anyone else have any other answer? Yeah.
Actually, if we finish the video that you show, the answer is there.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
You want to watch the video?
That's,
Okay.
yeah.
Let's
We,
finish the
I
video.
have like 2 questions, and one of them was her question, so you answer that. But still, we need to talk about that more.
I gotta say,
We need to watch the video.
the guy gets pretty ranty, so.
Yeah. He's going to fake Mars in January.
I came from fake Mars.
That's where you're going. You can do your simulation.
Yeah, you can go to the last part, so we don't need to watch the whole.
This isn't an ad.
Me too.
In Antarctica, small,
But yes, go ahead and
secluded
zoom all the way to where he talks about space.
Yeah.
Right.
There,
Yes.
Mars.
eat off their own dead
Right.
in a tiny ecosystem separated from the vast
Good, nice.
biosphere of Earth.
Can
This
you guys
could
see
be an
that? You
analog
wanna-
for subsurface environments on other worlds.
That's not right.
Mars, like Antarctica, was once warmer and wet at the surface.
No.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
Could similar mineral-munching microbes live there now? And there are several worlds in the solar system with subsurface oceans. Beneath Europa, in orbit around Jupiter, it is nearly certain large seas of water are kept liquid as that world flexes and heats due to tidal gravity from Jupiter's enormous mass. Could comparable creatures live there? And Europa is not alone. Its sisters at Jupiter, Callisto and Ganymede, and its tiny cousin Enceladus at Saturn, all
It's baffling. Oh, man.
Actually, click play. I think it
Click
actually
there,
stopped
yeah.
itself.
likely have subsurface lakes, seas, or full deep oceans. As cold, hard, and unforgiving as Antarctica may be, it's still a tropical paradise compared to the surfaces of those worlds. Finding out each of their life stories will be scientifically and technologically challenging indeed.
Indeed.
For Live Science, I'm Dave Brody.
Thank you, Dave.
Oh, I thought that was a ranting. That was not bad.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's not really related to this necessarily. That last bit. I don't know.
no, actually, it's related and like a lot.
Yes, please.
Woo.
Surprise.
Can I ask my question now?
Yeah.
Okay, so you talk about how important to this ecosystem, and she asked the question, and I need to ask the other half of the same question. You said they are like fear of the contamination, like they.
Yeah.
Why? Because we know that Antarctica, billion years ago, the whole Earth one piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the maybe macro stuff, we're living everywhere. It's not like isolated like something from space. We are in the same place. So why are they unique? And I know one of your articles that you choose, you were that article was talking about DNA and other stuff. So what's the difference? Do we have something unique there we don't know about it? And do we have like we need to keep it special or just? I'm sure the DNA shows something similar, right?
There was one species, which I don't know what it was because I'm not a biologist,
Yeah.
that had, it was 100% matched with another current living species on another part of Earth, I don't know where.
This
I-
isn't like Wilhelm? No, not Wilhelm, sorry, that's the German.
Vostok, I believe.
Vostok, okay.
It showed 100% match. However, there were also other ones that did not have 100% match, like not even close. Like that were the closest match they could find was I think 71% match, or I know one was 91% match with the current living species. One was 100% match. So yes, that species does exist in other parts of the planet. What it was, I don't know. It's in one of my articles.
So the one who this species live in very extreme like environment down there, right?
Yes.
And they've been there for millions of years, so they adopt this.
Yes, which is why they're not exact
The
matches for
one
other things.
the one that came from the surface, they can. Do you think they can survive in that?
It's not that they wouldn't survive. It's not that no, they probably would not survive in that environment. But they would mess up the sample that we would take from that. We would end up seeing things that, oh yeah, this is 100% match to something we see on the surface. Well, that's because it did come from the surface. So maybe that's what we have to watch out for. We have to have our samples be as pure as possible of just the material that we want to sample and not sampling. We don't have any sampling. Sampling bias isn't the right word, but I guess I'm trying to use contamination without using the word contamination.
I know it's not your major that biology, but just because you maybe you read the articles more than I did. Why the bacteria is more than anything? Like why you showed that the percentage is high for the bacteria, just like 1969.
Like 94% bacteria.
Yeah. Yeah, we can go back and look at that.
So there was, one of these articles discussed how some of these little suckers came to be in a subglacial lake. That might help you with this question.
Which article? I don't remember that.
Is it the one about Lake Vostok?
Yep, it's definitely one about the Lake Vostok. You have two of them about Lake Vostok.
Yeah.
Well, for some of these bacteria, they actually found that these are similar to bacterium such as Ecology, Salmonella, basically bacteria that even inside of us it's found within our digestive system. It helps break down the nutrients, helps digestion. So with these bacterium that feed and process nutrients, they were able to survive. They lived within the macrofauna that were stuck in these lakes when the ice covered. When the macrofauna died, they were able to harvest off of the nutrients and survive, thereby becoming able to less dependent on the symbiosis that they lived with the macrofauna and relied entirely on the nutrient cycles from the fresh water, from the meltwater, the accreting ice, potential geothermal energy bringing nutrients from the soils. So in a way, this is an isolated system, but it's almost a self-sufficient isolated system.
Well, it has to be a self-sufficient isolated system in order to survive this many millions of years isolated.
Plus, going to the answer the question before, if you think about it, for those that are potentially on other plants, they probably are dealing with the same thing. Complete lack of, sometimes possible complete lack of light. At night, oxygen concentrations that are well below survivability, even probably non-existent, and they're only surviving off of just basic nutrients. So really, this is a simulation. These are simulations of study areas that do not require artificially making, because they're naturally made.
Of other planets, other ecosystems, other potential ecosystems of planets, yeah. Yeah.
Question, I just lost it. I was kind of interested in the first paper you shared about alien microorganisms, I guess
Non-indigenous, yeah.
organisms.
Not that one, no.
'Cause I know
It's not on here.
I know you were interested in like waste
Yeah.
and how they deal with waste out there.
Mhm.
So I didn't quite get to the discussion in this, but was there any kind of risk for like human waste contaminating, not necessarily subglacial lakes?
Yeah, not for subglacial lakes, no.
Because there's no in and out.
No, yeah, and also because it's so far beyond, or it's so deep in, like underneath the glacier, without any purposeful discharge, there'd be no way for any human activity to actually access it.
But
Did I answer the question?
But could it be an issue for other areas there?
For more shallow areas, potentially. If care is not taken, but care obviously is taken.
Yeah. I don't know. So in the video, he was like scraping off some soil or something?
Yeah.
Is that the soil that was under this subglacial lake? Or where did that come from?
I would assume so.
Because it was boring through ice.
Yeah.
Presumably.
Mhm.
So I was wondering where this soil is coming from.
Would imagine some kind of
Yeah.
method where they drill almost all the way down and then let water come up and freeze?
Yes.
How do they know the depth until the lake?
I think also with satellite images.
Well, also they showed in the video that there's an attached camera or observation apparatus that probably allows them to see the progress,
Okay.
and combine that with satellite, they might be able to.
They didn't say they ran seismic or anything, did they?
Oh, I don't know about seismic,
I
but
don't think
it might have been, it could have been, I don't know, but it's also the chemistry changes. The
Okay.
ice changes and the
With
chemistry of
there's
the
a
ice
difference.
changes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. If you bring up the Lake Vostok one,
Yeah.
that's your accretion ice and things like that, you can tell that wherever it went, I could have sworn you just had it.
Yeah, it's not
There
there.
it is.
Yeah, I was like, we're going the wrong way. I wish I could make this bigger. Could you go to present? Yeah. So
That's the one.
I know it's really hard to see, but you have your accretion ice is here, which is, chemically, like, Dr. Dowling was saying, chemically different than the ice above it.
Okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah, actually, the seismic idea, I don't know if they've done it, it's a good idea.
I didn't
It may not, who knows why they've done it.
Yeah, I didn't see any evidence in the articles that I read, but then again, I wasn't looking for it,
Okay.
so,
Cause
So
like,
that is-
also like the ice kind of looks like seismic reflectors, so that's why I kind of thought.
yeah, I like that little wavy thing in there.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Actually, those do look like seismic lines.
Yeah,
What do you
it is
think?
seismic.
I meant
But
that
keep
it's
in mind
seismic.
also,
Yeah, it is
but keep in mind also that glaciers do often build up through accumulation of precipitation. So over the millions of years of the glacial ice covering the lake, it could have accumulated more precipitation, weight of it compacted, forming solid ice, and eventually becoming the main body of the glacier.
Could have got like other animals or soil or like leaf matter or something
Exactly.
like that.
This
They
one,
can see that.
this one definitely seismic.
You see that too, right?
Yeah, you see
Yeah.
this, if you, sorry, yeah.
I'm gonna try, can I,
Yeah, see if you can blow that up, please.
here, I'm just gonna edit this.
No, you need to do it. There's zoom down there, you can just.
Oh,
I
yeah,
wanna
go
edit it.
zoom, that's a good idea too.
I'm
Oh,
trying
there
to
it
control
goes.
shift. It's not working.
And also there's like sensors on the bed when you drill, or when you do the drilling.
Here,
There's like
Make it
sensor
as
like
big as
activity and
possible.
another tool that tell you the different
Is that better?
information. When it's changed, that mean like you go from the bed to different bed, like from one to
Right there,
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
echo-free zone.
Oh, you did
So it
that
seems they
seismic.
might have used seismic.
Oh,
to
there we
an
go,
extent,
ding
but-
ding.
But it appears as though that using seismic, there is a level in which it cannot penetrate, hence the echo-free zone, which means the shape of this is probably based off of just representation from the seismic layers residing above it.
That's Lake Vostok, I don't know if they did that for Lake William.
Well, Lake Vostok is, Lake Vostok is not only one of the largest subglacial lakes in Antarctica, it's also one of the largest lakes in the world. It is a very large body of water underneath the ice.
And we're getting yellow again.
Underneath the ice, as you can see, not only is there the lake water itself, but layers of deposits and pre-glacial sediments as well.
Oh, just so you know, I've actually asked someone to put a work order in to get this fixed because our other technician that got laid off, who was fabulous, would actually fix it for us.
Oh,
He could have fixed it in 5 minutes, but now we have to put a work order in.
What?
Loser.
yeah.
So, that has been requested, so hopefully in the future this will not happen again.
Great.
Who knows?
Okay, any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
It might be, this is pretty basic, I think, but, how do they seal those boreholes when they're done, or do they not?
That's a good question. I did, that wasn't, I saw a couple of articles talk about that, but didn't go into a whole lot of detail. And, for the scope of this, they do seal them. In fact, what they did in the, over the years for the Lake Vostok original borehole, every season that they went out, they had to reseal the borehole with something. What that was, I couldn't find any specifics, articles specifically talking about what it was. Dr. Dowling, do you have any other,
Just take out the fluid that prevents it from freezing and you let it freeze over.
That's what I had assumed.
Yeah.
Because,
At least that's what we do for the lakes.
okay,
The surface lakes. I assume that's more or less what they do for here as well.
So it just freezes at that breach hole?
Yeah.
yeah,
Is what you're saying?
You actively have to keep that hole open.
that's why you have, the 60 tons of, weight of the fluid, on keeping that hole open with that, your borehole in those 3,600 meters of depth.
Do you know if there is like collapsing in the wall inside the well?
I don't know if it collapses or
I
if it
don't
just
think
freezes
so.
in.
I think it just would freeze,
So they don't use like casing in the well?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah.
Like that video showed, that they just have, it's strong enough that it can hold, it's kind of amazing actually how it can hold that, the weight itself. But yes. I almost put in a picture, this is actually a good picture. There's a, I mean, it was in the video, I almost pointed it out of the video, of the bore, or the drill bit, hot water device that they use for, the hot water drilling that I kind of wanted to talk about at first in my section. Yeah, that's your, water collection and, or sample collection and your bore.
So you just take the drill out, and everything's back to normal, fine, kosher. So they think? Do we know that?
So they think.
It's just because if it's a closed ecosystem and then you drill a hole in it.
That's why we gotta be really careful about it. And why in 1998, when there wasn't a lot of research done on it, they were like, hey, maybe we shouldn't go all the way through yet. And unfortunately, they did stop.
So usually when oil companies, when they like do drilling, there will be like a fraction in the wall, and
Yeah.
the fluid of drilling will like infiltrate in this
Yeah, yeah.
fraction and create what we call it like a flush zone.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the
I
same
don't
case
think that
there?
happens, no. I think that the ice is dense enough.
There's no permeability.
So
I don't think so, no.
Yeah.
Now, how it handles with the antifreeze and stuff, I don't know how they keep that from like expanding the borehole.
I've never done that one. The holes I've made, literally, I took I forgot what it's called, but you keep putting
Geoprobe?
a what?
A geoprobe?
No.
One of the,
Literally, it has a drill bit on it,
oh, okay.
and you drill a hole. Then you take it all out, put a new one on, and now it's 6 feet long, and you put it down back in, and then after a while, you stick in a glycol heater, and you warm it up.
So,
But that's for 6 meters, not 3,000
3600.
meters. So I don't know how they do that.
Yeah.
So I found this really interesting article, I just found it right now. It's
Oh.
from 2016, and it talks about a new rapid access ice drill. I'm not gonna read it though for you because, yeah. I'm gonna zoom it in a little bit bigger. Is that big enough? And you notice that it does say right here, subglacial access.
Oh, this sheets in order to create borehole observatories and glacial people.
It goes to like 3,300 meters, that's really.
And it also does mention
Cap.
capped and available for future downhole measurement of temperature and all this stuff. And less than 200 hours.
Wow.
Wild.
Yeah.
That's too long. And it does, oops, ow. Does say penetrate up to
Yeah.
3,300.
Dang.
poison.
200.
10 days versus
and
2
also
years.
says
Probably
ice.
not in Antarctica.
So they
Biology.
definitely do use like probably seismic stuff because it says ice penetrating
Image
imaging
method.
message.
Image
Will provide unique 3D
Yeah.
picture. That's really cool.
Yeah,
That's
and
a-
it's from 2016, so that's, you know, within the last 3 years.
Would you, send that, you said you were gonna, put stuff up, but you could also send that because that's a really good one.
Yeah.
Because we had lots of questions about it.
And yeah, I didn't,
I can tell you how to do it for 6 meters, I have no idea how to do it for 3,000.
The other 2,000.
3,000 meters.
I'll
So,
download
not for
it.
like 3.3
I can work
kilometers.
with it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
afterwards.
Can you send your slides too?
Yes, I'm gonna send this, in fact, let me remember to edit that one slide back, because I blew up the picture.
Yeah, can you go ahead and also?
Yes.
Is there any controversy in terms of, or like, how do you feel about using Freon? Because Freon is chlorofluorocarbon, is it not? Because of climate change?
Yes, I have a feeling they stopped using it.
Yeah, they don't use that
Yeah.
anymore.
Add
Yes.
this, about the other anti-freezing agents that they use.
The only other anti-freezing agent I know that they use in other parts is glycol.
Oh wait, this is.
Yeah, that's the only one. Kerosene is not really used anymore.
Yeah.
See, I have it.
Glycol is about as
Awesome.
friendly as you're gonna get.
Yeah.
Not really friendly, but no, Freon, that was before before they knew the ozone hole was even a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they started drilling in the 70s, I think, 80s,
Yeah.
70s.
There, okay.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
Early
maybe
on.
go back and you can edit it later. Yeah, they definitely want us to share.
Yes, and let me,
And I just found it, so that was
Okay.
pretty cool.
let me not have this giant picture in here
I have another question.
for
Yes.
upload.
Did they
Yes.
found Superman house?
That's the North Pole with Fortress of Solitude.
Good.
Oh my lord! That's like.
The Fortress of Solitude is located in the North Pole. Probably north
Yeah,
of
it's
Greenland.
right there in the article. I didn't miss that part. They found actually, super whales.
Well, one of the biggest conspiracies for Antarctica is apparently there's an underground Nazi
Nazis,
base.
they're country.
Yeah,
There-
yeah.
There's a movie about that on Netflix, don't watch it.
In one of the articles, I think I actually saw something, it's like, among things such as Nazi bases and other things like that, or blah, 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 subglacial lakes. It was in like the intro bit of the article, I didn't use the article.
Oh,
But
okay.
I thought it was, it had good information in it, it was joking around in the article, but it's like,
Conspiracies about Antarctica.
Every
but I'm like, I didn't end up using it because there was other better articles out there.
every great lie is lined with the truth. A bit
We
of the
can,
truth.
would you like, since we used extra articles that were not in the, definitely, that were not within just the 3 that were posted on Canvas, would you like the other articles as well? What do you guys
That
think?
does
Since
not
you guys
matter,
have
everyone's
questions
used articles outside their 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking,
That
yeah.
is not gonna be an issue.
We'll include this one about the raid.
Yeah, because the drilling, we had lots of questions
Yeah.
about that one,
Yeah,
so
and
that's a
I
good
also
one.
found this article.
Okay.
Oh, yes, that's a good one too. How do you?
I
what's
already
the-
added it to our folder so then we can
Yeah,
share it. with
we'll
you
share it.
guys.
We'll share after class. I'll figure out a way to give you the article or give you the PowerPoint, whatever.
Yeah, I
but,
just found this one, you know, it says like this probe is designed for clean access, is negatively buoyant, which I don't understand what that means.
Same.
5.2 meters long, 200 millimeters in diameter, approximately.
Cylindrical.
How do they keep it quote unquote sterile
Heat.
going down?
Yeah, they basically heat it up to kill anything on there.
Yeah, so,
Like one of the articles that I saw, they use the term pasteurized water and itself, essentially. It's that hot.
so are they concerned about when they get down there possibly destroying?
Yes, that's the problem with hot water melting or hot water drilling.
Yeah, are they trying, are the samples live then, live cultures? or-
They try to, which is the really hard part.
What if there's an outbreak?
It
There's-
is. What if we have like a big
there's-
thing up in the North Pole or
Super
towards the
bacteria.
north, anthrax with the melting?
Yes, the permafrost melting, there's some nasty things coming out of that right now.
Viruses in there too.
Yeah, a bunch of reindeer died.
Oh.
Yeah, that sexy megapod all died.
yeah, so this one was also 2016.
I didn't realize
Does it
there'd be
mean
this
like
many
an actual
questions about boring.
Stream.
Yep.
Yes, that is way we ended up going.
I would have done more research about boring had I done this, had I known this. Boring research about boring holes.
Is there like a micro, I'm sorry, this is probably outside your realm, but like, so you know how sometimes like you bring a fish up from the deep, it looks like weird as hell because it's normally the pressure.
Yes.
So like
Oh.
its entire integrity changes.
Yes.
Are they concerned about that with the microorganisms in terms
Wow.
of that integrity?
I have
change?
no, I was going to say, I have no idea.
I think that could be the
No
possibility.
idea.
I think that could be the
Figured.
possibility.
It
Yeah.
sounds
Well-
like it's a reasonable possibility.
Yeah,
which is
Yeah.
what
it
my
is a
heart
reasonable
said.
possibility because,
Yeah.
again,
Let's read it.
much
I
like
can't-
the macrofauna, this is a creature that exists in this isolated system to these very specific, like, these very specific conditions. So it could stand to reason, or reasonable logic that if you do the same as you would an anglerfish or a viperfish from that depth, it most likely would not survive because it would be exposed to bright light, oxygen will enter, and it will have a lack of the nutrients it usually feeds off of.
Is there any way, or any studies that have done, like if they put a camera on the drill, why not just put just a camera with no drill and just, or I guess you have to have a drill, but either way, go down and just kind of study them in situ?
Well, the problem with that is because the lakes are under pressure, the second you breach the lake, you will, which is what the 2015 Russian study did do. They let the water come up into the borehole, let it freeze,
Yeah.
and then they took that sample of stuff. So
That is-
in terms of live, I don't know.
That is actually another thing with most subglacial lakes, other places is that when they're underneath the glacier, they're in basically a level of hydrostatic pressure that keeps it in its shape. But the minute
Yeah.
that's breached,
Mhm.
it then evacuates the water in an event called the yokalak. There's umlauts, yes. Basically, this is an extreme
German.
evacuation of water from it and out to through near conduits into the area, which is what resulted in that one picture I showed, which is basically a completely empty subglacial lake.
It's more or less becomes an artesian well where all
That's
the
what I
water.
was gonna say. It's
Yeah,
like
that's a
these
good,
ones.
I was
No,
looking
makes
for that
sense.
word, yeah.
Artesian,
It's-
yes, but he's right, there is a specific name for that pressure just outpouring, what's it called?
Yokalak.
Okay. Starts with a J?
J umlaut O L K LKHLAUPS. Yokalaps.
That's what, yeah.
Which means that it is most likely an event that has probably been studied and first observed within the Baltic Peninsula or even Central Europe, probably near the northern Baltic seas.
Oh, that $20 that there is an equivalent of a blobfish.
Well, if you look at the anglerfish, it technically is a blobfish with its circular body shape. At least the female, because the males are actually the size of like
Yeah.
your fingers like this.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
To the subglacial lakes, the microorganisms, why we should give a damn.
Or about boreholes. 'Cause
About worms?
boreholes.
Boreholes.
Wormholes, let's talk about
Yeah, let's talk about wormholes. Let's talk about more
I'm
stuff
pretty
that
sure I
isn't about
entered a
rivers.
wormhole
Dude,
this
let me
weekend.
talk about
My
Stargate.
time.
Background,
Let's start to talk about what?
Stargate, let's,
Oh, yeah, of course! The Antarctica, yes, that's, yeah, part of Atlantis, but not really. Yes.
What?
SG-1, Stargate 1. It's a 10-year series show.
it's on Hulu, all.
Oh, it's also on Amazon Prime. Yeah. And I'm up to
But
season
back
9.
to topic, anybody have any questions at all?
All right, well, thank you very much.